Everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balcowers. We're back for another edition of Thyroid Thursday. Today we're talking about this story that a lot of people are told that if their medical doctor, their functional practitioner, their integrative practitioner can optimize their labs into a set range, then they've restored your thyroid physiology and you should feel and function well. And it's just not true. How do I know? Because the bulk of the people that I take care of are people that have gone to those people, they've had their blood levels optimized, and they still don't feel well. Sure, they feel a little bit better at times, better than they did without thyroid medication, but they don't feel well. They don't feel like their health has been restored. They still have chronic signs and symptoms. They're stuck somewhere between where they were and where they want to go. So if that's you, then this is a great episode of Thyroid Thursday to listen to. And to be fair, I think those people that are managing your thyroid physiology and trying to optimize your blood levels of whatever blood marker that they care about have good intentions. I just don't believe that what they're doing allows someone to recover their thyroid physiology and recover well-being in most cases, okay? So this whole idea that if you optimize somebody's blood levels, that we've actually fixed them. It is a story. You've been told a story, but you haven't been told the story. And the reality is, in most cases, manipulating blood values into somebody's preconceived range of normal or optimal doesn't often restore health and well-being. So let's talk about why that might be. The number one reason is that the blood levels aren't the problem. The blood value that somebody's looking at tells us a story. And so if you have an elevated TSH, it tells a story. To somebody who only runs a TSH, the story it tells them is that the thyroid gland can't make enough T4 or T3. But if they only run a TSH and they don't look at the rest of the thyroid panel, they may not see that TSH is elevated even though there's plenty of T4 in the system. So they see the lab, that lab tells them a story that TSH is high, therefore the thyroid gland's not making enough thyroid hormone, so they then need to provide T4 to suppress it. But because they had a limited look at the thyroid physiology and they didn't really interpret the labs, which we'll talk about next, they see the lab tells them a story, and they provide what they believe is an appropriate strategy. In the functional or integrative space, they look at a bigger panel, and they look at TSH, free T4, free T3, reverse T3, and thyroid antibodies. And those labs tell that practitioner a story. They see thyroid antibodies and they say you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, your immune antibodies are eating away the thyroid gland and destroying your thyroid gland. So we're going to put you on thyroid medication. But the reason that your medical doctor's T4 solution didn't work is because they didn't look at T3 and reverse T3. To that integrative or functional practitioner, they'll see a normal T4 and elevated reverse T3, and that tells them a story. It tells them that reverse T3 is blocking T3 from being made and binding to receptors, which is a story, but it's not the story. But they believe that story, so they believe that the T3, you need to reduce your T4 and take T3. They may look at the free T4 and see it's normal and see the free T3 and say, oh, it's too low, therefore you've lost the ability to convert T4 to T3. That's the story they read from those labs, and it is a story, but it's not the story. But it's the story that they're applying their treatment strategy. So they decrease T4, add T3, keep adding T3 because they're trying to optimize the T3 and the reverse T3 into their preconceived range. And once they get the values they care about into a range, they're going to assume that they've fixed your thyroid physiology, just like the medical endocrinologist who gives you T4 and suppresses TSH into the range they like, thinks that they fixed your physiology. And if that was the case, you probably wouldn't be listening to this video. You probably wouldn't have consistent signs and symptoms. You probably wouldn't be stuck in this thyroid purgatory. So Labs tell us a story. They're not the problem. When we see an elevated TSH, we need to ask more questions. Is TSH elevated because there's an iodine deficiency? Is TSH elevated because the gland's making enough T4, but the peripheral tissues aren't converting T4 to T3 appropriately? Instead, it's favoring the deactivation. We need to look deeper. We need to ask more questions. So the labs are not the problem. They are an indication of a problem. And if interpreted appropriately, they can tell us the story about how to help you with your thyroid physiology. The second thing is that you've been told a story that labs are either too high or too low. And if we just push the value into that range, then we've restored health. And medical physicians will use the normal lab reference range. Functional or integrative practitioners will have their own, what they call optimal range. And that is not true. It is a story. It is a story they believe, but it's not a reality. Their labs can't be read for just high or low, regardless of whether you're using a normal or a functional range or an optimal range. Lab values have to be interpreted. Is the lab value normal or optimal and appropriate for the person who's sitting in front of me? Is the lab value normal or optimal but inappropriate for the person sitting in front of me? Is the lab value abnormal and appropriate for the person sitting in front of me? And is the lab value abnormal and inappropriate for the person sitting in front of me? So if you went to a clinician, or let's say an integrative or functional practitioner, you've been put on T4 and T3, and somebody's focus is optimizing your reverse T3 really low as they can get it, and T3 in their optimal range is somewhere between 4 and 6, and they're saying you're now optimal, but yet your hair is falling out, you're still constipated, you still don't feel well, you have anxious anxiety, brain fog, then yes, they've optimized the lab into their normal range, but it's not appropriate for the person sitting in front of them. And they can gaslight you all they want and say, no, you're optimal, no, you're optimal, no, you're optimal, but you know based on your signs and symptoms that you're not. So labs need to be interpreted. They cannot just be read for a high or a low. The third reason that optimized labs often don't leave you feeling optimal is that you've been told that the immune-driven damage to the gland and your inability to convert T4 to T3 is broken physiology. The immune system's out of control, it's just destroying your gland, that your body's forgotten how to convert T4 to T3 into cells and tissues to support a normal homeostatic thyroid state. So the doctor must come in and rescue you. They need to suppress your immune system. They need to provide more thyroid medication or more thyroid medication in the thyroid gland would ever make to optimize the values. And that's not true. You're oftentimes, and literature talks about this, I talk about in my book, that a hypothyroid state is not broken physiology. It is the adaptive response to excessive cellular stress. You're not broken. The reduced ability to convert T4 to T3 isn't broken physiology. It is the adaptive response to slow down the metabolism and ramp up cell defense. And we know today that we operate in two states. We're either in a low stress homeostatic state where we make thyroid hormone, we convert it optimally, we feel and function great, or we're in excessive cell stress state where we have reduced conversion of T4 to T3 and we feel symptomatic. And we have, because of that cell stress state being chronic, it induces thyroiditis and a reduction of thyroid gland production. Because that's an adaptive state, not a broken state, putting more thyroid hormone into a system that doesn't want it doesn't improve your overall health and well-being. It can change it, but it's not going to restore well-being because you're not broken and more doesn't fix it. So what's the solution? Stop obsessing over trying to optimize your labs as if you're in homeostasis. You're not, okay? Start identifying what's creating the excessive stress load and address and eliminate and reduce those things. The key to thyroid recovery, okay, is not about optimizing your labs. Labs are not static things. Labs tell a story. They aren't the problem. So it's not about having a perfect lab value all the time. They should fluctuate. And if we interpret them, not read them, we know when a fluctuation from the optimal state is appropriate. It's having thyroid recovery is about creating an environment where your cells thrive versus be under constant stress. So hopefully this Thyroid Thursday helps. If you have any questions, put them below the video. If you need some help, go to my website, rejuvegencenter.com, and schedule a complimentary discovery call. Take care.